What I think you ought to do is boycott Apple until such time as they give that security number. How do you like that?
Trump wants to boycott Apple products. Well, that's right up there with wanting to ban cheese, shredded cheese last week.
Ban shredded cheese because... Was that because it has like wood pulp in the Parmesan or some nonsense like that? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, he wants to make America great again.
Holy crap, guys. You know what time it is?
What?
Rant 30. It's Rant 30 and Apple's on the front burner here.
Alright guys, it is Rant 30, and you know what? We actually agree with Donald Trump. If you guys have been to our store, you've seen our Stop Buying Apple Products shirt. So, we actually agree with Donald Trump here, but we agree for totally different reasons. And that's very important. Now, Apple, they are really fighting the FBI and the government right now, and we agree with them. We agree that they should not be compelled to make a tool, an apparatus.
They're being asked to make what effectively equates to a forensic instrument for the FBI to use to brute force this phone.
From now on, hence known as a backdoor. So they've been asked to make a backdoor, and we agree they should not make a backdoor. But we agree for different reasons, and that's what we're going to talk about, because sometimes the reason behind something is more important than what they are doing. They're doing the right thing, but it ain't the right way.
The FBI has said in their response that Apple is doing this for marketing reasons, blah, blah, blah. The amount of lip service and manipulation on both sides of the issue here, from both the FBI and Apple, is really appalling. And so I could talk about the meta part of this for a second, which is both sides have realized that this kind of thing is all about marketing and presentation. And they're not arguing to the merits, they're not arguing to logic, they're not arguing to anything. It is totally and completely a situation where they're appealing to emotion and they're trying to, appeal to their bases and they're trying to appeal to new markets. And that alone on both sides drives me insane. That alone makes me want to just, it's like rip up the encryption. Neither one of you are allowed to have any toys. Both of you have to go home and sit in a timeout corner. This is ridiculous. And so on the one hand, the FBI is saying, you need to be at sphincter pucker level 3 in fear. We need this. We've got to absolutely protect all you guys from all of this stuff. You should be afraid of everything, and we're going to white knight this and totally protect you guys. This coming from the people who have not been able to do much of anything. I mean, think about the level of government dysfunction. I mean, we don't need to even talk about like the OPM hack, where it was the single largest, personal records hack ever. Of course, this is never going to get out. That's completely insane. But on the Apple side, Apple has hit market saturation in America. This is a fact. If you don't even think about the case, the amount of Apple products Apple has sold in America is insane. iPads, iPhones, laptops, the whole 9 yards. Apple has completely taken over the universe. Yay, Unix! But again, Apple and, hardware that's 2 generations old and way overpriced. $600 for 32 gigabytes of RAM? I can't get over that. I'm going to have an aneurysm if I don't stop thinking about that. And, I mean, it's true. With 600, I mean, just what? The mind reels. I can't wrap my brain around it. But anyway, Apple has sold 32 gigabytes of RAM for $600 to untold countless Americans, and their market is saturated, and they need to sell to China and other countries. And so, let's look at the history. Apple has given the source code to their phone operating system to China. China has access to the source code. What about that from a security implication? Well, China doesn't have the certificates, the signing certificates. The signing certificates are this cryptographic mechanism that allows Apple to create an executable program that the iPhone will trust. And so without this cryptographic certificate, the iPhone won't trust it unless there's a flaw in the Apple operating system, and those flaws are what intelligence agencies have executed. And so our intelligence agencies theoretically have figured this out. The FBI so far has either been unwilling or unable to hire contractors to handle it, but the reality is they have been able to handle contractors to handle it. And we're going to talk about one of those contractors in a minute because they've got a great blog post you should go read. But even, John McAfee has popped up and said, my elite team of hacker super nerds will crack this thing for you and no problem, which shows that it's not about this one phone. It's about having the tool and having the surreptitious access and being able to do anything without any real transparent oversight. But on the Apple side, why Apple's doing this for the wrong reasons, they see their growth in foreign markets. They don't see their growth in America, and they're probably right about that. The South American iPhone, the Argentinian iPhone, the super cheap iPhone for China. They're not going to be able to sell their phones there because there has already been disastrous fallout for Cisco and Juniper and other American networking companies in those areas, even in Europe. You know, it's kind of a joke in Europe among like banks and financial institutions, because backdoors planted by government agencies or intelligence agencies, maybe not the American government agencies, but certainly people with high up access, have been discovered in both Cisco and Juniper products. The elliptic curve encryption algorithm from RSA was completely compromised from day one by the NSA. Like the algorithm published is very good, the math is very good, but the random numbers were very carefully selected so that the encryption had a backdoor. These are facts. These are things that actually really, honest to God, happen. And as a result of that, with this networking gear, nobody in Europe is buying any of that at all. They're not buying Cisco. Cisco lost like $1 billion off their market cap as a result of this. Apple has witnessed this disaster in the networking industry, and they're looking at consumer goods, and they don't want this kind of thing to happen with consumer goods. They don't want to lose customer confidence in China. If somebody in China is, reading about all this stuff with Apple, and it's like, hey, my Apple phone has a government, U.S. government backdoor, they're not going to buy Apple products. It's just not going to happen. So regardless of what Apple says, that is a huge component to it, because dollars.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, because as a corporation and as a company, you ultimately are responsible for your bottom line. And growth, while Apple is this gigantic monolith of a company, and we're like, well, they don't really need to grow anymore. Well, they don't, but from a corporate standpoint, I'm going to turn my logic brain off here and just go straight corporate drone, is that it is their responsibility to continue to make more money and to improve profits and to raise the bottom, or lower the bottom line and increase profit margin for the shareholders. And that's true with any company that's got a corporate charter, and that's what their job is to do. That's what Tim Cook's job is to do. So in that part, I can't necessarily fault them for that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that all of this is as simple as, oh, we're protecting you, because Apple says they're protecting us, the FBI says they're protecting us, and they both are kind of right on this.
Let's define exactly what that protection is. The government on a terrorist phone, which this is not the terrorist only phone, they destroyed their other phones by grinding it into a fine pulp. This is the terrorist work phone, which presumably they don't care about if they destroyed their other phone, but that's a story for another time. We've got the work phone that they did not destroy. There was a backup, an encrypted backup on iCloud. But because the encrypted backup is divorced from the thing that would erase the backup, they can brute force the PIN number as many times as they want. They can brute force the encryption on that as much as they want and get it. And so the unencrypted iCloud backup, the encrypted iCloud backup that has undoable encryption, they already have that. But it's 6 weeks before the incident that they have that backup. And they have all the communication records and all of the text messages, because all of that is stored with the phone company. The phone company has all those records. It's not as if Apple keeps only those records. No, that's not true at all. Those records are stored many other places. The contact list, well, we know it was their work phone, and so we have their work contacts, and I'm sure that all of the work phones for all of the work contacts have all been imaged, and they've all been backed up, and they've all been analyzed. And so any known associates of that person, all of that data has already been gathered. What on the phone possibly could be useful? I think this is a stalking horse for exactly this conversation. I think this is the perfect phone, the perfect case to win over the hearts and minds of the American people, or whatever the hell is going on, to sort of force the situation here. It's a paper tiger. It's a stalking horse. I don't know what you want to call it, depending on how you want to look at it.
It's a plane full of cadavers on the runway.
It's an opportunity for the expansion of power. And because it's an opportunity for the expansion of power, we have to scrutinize it much more closely than just this one phone in this one situation. If it's just one phone in one situation, it's really easy. But if you have to do an extraordinary thing in order to be able to do this, then I don't know. Maybe, to me, I think a better solution to this problem would be to have a hardware debugging interface on the printed circuit board of an Apple iPhone. Basically a pogo pin interface. They actually already exist probably on just about everything. A pogo pin interface where when you've got the Apple iPhone taken apart and you're on the motherboard, there's gold contacts on it, and you have a special connector, and you connect the connector to the motherboard, and then you can do in-circuit debugging, With in-circuit debugging, you can read the RAM of the phone, and it's game over at that point. That requires specialized physical hardware tools. The amount of access that criminals might have would be limited. But Apple is never going to do this, and the reason that they're never going to do this is because they're trying to get the payment card industry, the PCI industry, to okay Apple devices' security for the fingerprint read for commercial transactions, and being able to use basically enroll your iPhone like as if it was a credit card for the near field communication, and then so your iPhone basically becomes a credit card at that point, and you can just touch it and use it. And that's what Apple wants with PCI. In order to do that, they've got to have the device as locked down as possible from a hardware standpoint. It's got to have remote wipe. The phone's basically got to defend itself, and that's the difference between the image of the phone in iCloud and the image of the phone on the phone. Right now, the software on the phone defends itself against brute force pen attacks. The copy of the phone is not executing, it's not running, and so because it's not running, it can't erase itself after a certain number of failed pen attempts or failed encryption whatevers. And that's really the difference between the running iPhone and the iPhone that's in the iCloud, is that the running iPhone has the ability to defend itself, basically to commit seppuku if it's been brute forced too many times.
And this isn't new.
That seems reasonable.
And it's so this isn't like something that only Apple's doing or any of those lines. This is not an uncommon practice. Now, I thought it was really funny that Bill Gates came out and he was talking about some stuff, and it looks like everybody was like, "See, Bill Gates says the FBI is right," and that's also not true. If you actually watch this interview, the interviewer keeps prodding him with this backdoor term, and Bill seems to have this kind of generalized statement about it. And he's kind of taking the stance on, we've always been kind of providing this data, such as like you're talking about with the iCloud stuff.
Whenever they say backdoor, he goes, it's not about that. So Bill obviously doesn't understand this specific case. He thinks that it is just like what Wendell said, where it's one device. He's misinformed.
I think it's not that he doesn't understand the case. I think that he's that's the term, ill-informed about the case. Because I think if you actually explain it to him, he'd be like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, they want a backdoor? No.
Well, it turns out we were right. Well, it turns out we were right about that, because when he did some more reading, he's like, oh, this is not that. This situation is not that. This situation is actually really bad. And so he did not come out on the side of the FBI the way that the media is saying. He's since clarified his position to say, no. You, the public, I guess, you're kind of the public, what does it tell you when the entire technology industry is telling you that this is not reasonable because it weakens the security of us all?
The FBI has approached Apple with a phone from the San Bernardino shooter, and they have demanded that Apple create a piece of software, as I was calling it earlier, a forensic instrument that they can then use to brute force the passcode on the phone so they can unlock the phone and get access to the encrypted data that's on the phone. But in order to do that, they have to create a signed piece of software that will come from Apple, signed by Apple, that the phone will accept as a piece of software that is approved for use, that they can then just pummel away at this thing and get access to the device.
Now, let's be clear on that. They have asked Apple to go out and create essentially a backdoor piece of software. They haven't said Apple, they have said, Apple, give us everything you have. And Apple has been giving them everything they had. If Apple had all the data, it would be right in the government's hands. And the same is true for Google and Yahoo or any company that has data. If the government shows up and says, you've got some data sitting there, give it to us right now. Apple, any company would just hand it right over, and they have cooperated as far as that goes.
So even in reference to this, the FBI made the demand, we need all of the iCloud data so we can decrypt it and find out what's going on there, and they handed them over the iCloud data. The issue here is that from 6 weeks before the shooting to like 2-3 days after the shooting, there's no backup from the phone. And 2-3 days after the shooting is when the San Bernardino Police Department changed the iCloud password for the user at the request of the FBI. And that's actually kind of put us into the predicament that we're in, where they're like, oh, we still need to get access to the data that's on the phone. And Apple's like, well, you could just get it to back up to iCloud. Yeah, well, we can't really do that.
Because we messed with something.
Like, the specific thing that's happening there is the phone is asking for the new iCloud password behind the lock screen. And what the FBI is asking for is for Apple to issue a software update that the phone will then download, even though it's still locked, that will allow them to brute force the pin, or that takes the pin away, or whatever. The problem is that it's not just for this one phone. It would this situation that the FBI has created by doing this password reset shenanigans when they should not have, is that this would work on any iPhone. It's not just this one iPhone. It could be used by anybody. And the thing that we should resist is making security weaker in order to allow surreptitious access, or access, globally. The thing that I don't think that we're not saying that, the government should not be allowed to access this. We're not saying that at all. They totally should be able to access this one phone. But at the same time, we don't want to weaken the tools that we as citizens use to protect ourselves from criminals. And the line is very fine here, but it's very important that we stay on the right side of that line, because as soon as we're on the other side of that line, it's a slippery slope downhill faster than the speed of light.
Wendell, you sent us this earlier, where NSA actually created a backdoor key from Lotus Notes. And it wasn't so much that they were completely like just turnkey, oh, well, we have access to everybody's Lotus Notes, but it was specifically for exports out of the U.S., because this was back when encryption was still considered a munition. So in the RSA that they were using in the Lotus Notes that was exported to any other country other than the U.S. had a 24-bit constant string of encrypted data. So every single time you'd encrypt everything, 24 of those bits were identical across the board. So when the NSA came along, they basically had 24 of the 64-bit encryption already figured out for them, and it just reduced the amount of time it would take to decrypt anything. When I was a part of a system that was trying to brute force the 64-bit encryption for the purpose of this is how strong it really is, I think it took 5 years with the hardware that was available at the time, and a 56-bit encryption took 5 days. So a 40-bit encryption might take 50 minutes. It doesn't take very long. And this is with hardware from 10 years ago, not hardware from now. Hardware from now, 64-bit is still difficult.
Just throw 17970 at it, done in two seconds.
Lotus Notes had this whole thing built in. It was kind of like, wow. And somebody came across this and found, you can see it on the screen here, this is the NSA's public key that he reverse engineered out of this, out of the Lotus Notes software. And this is where it's really interesting, is right here where he's got highlighted. It says Mini Truth and Big Brother, and that was the organization and the CN, and that's straight out of 1984.
Mini Truth is it's an homage to 1984, the Ministry of Truth, Mini Truth. That was this was present in Lotus Notes, which is an email program, and Lotus 123, which is a spreadsheet program from circa a long time ago.
So this whole practice isn't new. So as we were saying earlier, Microsoft, Apple, Google, all of these companies, when presented with a subpoena to provide data for the specific kind of case, they all provide it. It's something that they do.
Now
and you don't necessarily know, and that's the part where I have a problem. It's like, all right, fine, get a warrant, but don't get a warrant from a secret court and have gag orders. That's insane. Don't do that. That's ridiculous. Let's talk about for a second the Darcys Blog, who's a forensic researcher, and how this matters from the context of handling court cases where this tool has been used. Because, it came out that, no, it's not just this one iPhone. The Department of Justice has 12 other iPhones, none of which are terrorist-related, that they would like to unlock and do stuff with.
You don't say.
Well, that's kind of a little more on the tinfoil hat side of things. I mean, in the realistic function of forensic science, like any good science, you have to follow your scientific method. You have to have you have to be able to prove that it works. You have to be able to replicate it, and you have to make your results and your methods available for others to replicate this as a forensic tool. The FBI is asking Apple to create a tool that they can use, not so much a tool that Apple will use. If it's one thing if the FBI goes, hey, we got this phone, can you get us the data off it? I'm guessing Apple probably could do that, but that's not what the FBI has asked. We need you to create this tool so we can use this thing to do this thing. And when you create a tool for a forensic purpose, like fingerprinting or what was the other thing I mentioned before? Breathalyzer is a good one. In order for a breathalyzer or even like a radar gun to be relevant in court cases, you have to have the science that shows what it does, how it works, why it works, and then you have to be able to replicate that product, which is why you have like 20 different products. This one's the great one, and then you got all these other ones that just kind of work. But this is the one the police use. It's been calibrated on the 27th of January. That calibration is good for 6 months. They calibrate them every 3 months. So when they go to court, they go, I have this device. It has been accredited by all of these government things as a tool to use in this forensic process of proving that this person was drunk behind the wheel. And this is when it was calibrated last. We do a calibration every such and such a time, blah, blah, blah. They are basically saying, this is the tool we use, this is how we use it, this is the science that backs it up, this is why this guy is guilty.
Yeah, let me say this in one sentence here, because this will also tie back into the whole purpose of the Rant 30. The courts and the FBI want Apple to make this tool, and then they want them to get in a very public court case and explain how to compromise their devices.
Yeah.
There it is. They would have to, and that's why they're saying no, because they know that is PR suicide. And globally.
No.
And that goes right back into what you were saying, Wendell, about the PCI, the expanding to other markets. All of this stuff, it is effectively Apple committing suicide, or seppuku, as you put it.
Well, it's the device committing seppuku, but the really, really amazing thing is like, all right, let's put your tinfoil hat on, 5 years in the future. Do you imagine that, every city in America is going to have their police cruisers equipped with a device to just copy the entire phone? It's like, oh, can I see your phone for a second? Click, I'll just copy the whole phone. Oh, no, that's, what, you guys at Tech Syndicate, no, you guys always have the tinfoil hat on. That would never happen. Guess what? I'm going to give you a term to Google. It's called Cellbrite. Yeah, that's fine. Just pause us and go Google Cellbrite right now. Because that device already exists and is already being used by local, like just your local podunk, not even the state police, just like the local police. Cellbrite sells devices for cloning people's phones, and it is quite widespread that somebody's phone might be cloned and trawled for evidence at just a routine traffic stop. Oops, tinfoil hat. Nope, it's already here. Sorry. It doesn't work with iOS 8 and newer iPhones, and so this is why there is some frustration from law enforcement, starting top down from FBI, because that was already happening. You guys didn't even think we'd started down the slippery slope, and we had almost hit rock bottom in reality. And so now it's like Apple is doing this. Google has enabled encryption by default on newer Androids, which is meant to also circumvent the whole Cellbrite situation. And so there existed already a product for law enforcement, sold, very successful product, sold to law enforcement that was just in your standard issue. It's like ticket issuing cruiser to copy people's phones in order to look for evidence of a crime.
I just want to make sure.
Definitely seems like an overreach.
I want to make sure that's right. As a police officer, I've got a steering wheel. I've got the computer that is able to look up everybody's license plate and tell me if they've got any kind of traffic violation. I've got the license scanner that can you just drop the license in and it scans the barcode or the NFC or the 2D barcode on the back or the mag stripe. And then they've got the breathalyzer, and they've got the phone cloner. And then they've got, what else do we got? Then we got tasers and guns and batons and rubber bullets. I mean,
Stingray.
What else do they need?
Stingray.
Next thing you know, they're going to have like a mini shut down this person's car. Ooh.
They've got
Don't
that
you dare! What,
they've got that.
Oh yeah, they've already got the back door into the car
Well,
that we can take control of.
A lot of the cars that
OnStar.
Yeah, they've got the OnStar. They can just turn that off.
There you go. So yeah, then they've got a button. Except, do they have to do that, or do they have to call it back to Central and say, "Hey, Central, OnStar, can you shut this guy off?" No, this is kind of the whole point.
No, if we're gonna go full tinfoil hat here, let's go full tinfoil hat. If they have the ability to do whatever the hell they want to your phone, in addition to just clone it, then they can install software on it to turn on the microphone and turn on the cameras and all this kind of stuff. And if you don't know how crazy that is, that's already happening in Germany. Yeah, sorry, Germany. Your intelligence community has already rolled this out for Android phones. They can surreptitiously, they can use Stingray-like technology and install this type of thing on phones in Germany. And it's approved by the court system. It's this really insidious backdoor where they can turn on the microphones and do everything. And so how long is it until here in America we would get another order compelling Apple and Google to make their voice recognition stuff always on to look for certain things? And if you don't believe me that would be totally within the realm of possibility for something that they might compel to do, I mean, I am being a little tongue-in-cheek here. We're not completely serious because the mechanisms don't really exist in U.S. law, we think. But at the same time, the FBI is using the All Writs Act of 1789, 19 years before the light bulb was invented, in order to try to compel Apple into doing this. And so if you don't believe me...
Okay, Google, what is the All Writs Act of 1789?
Now do you believe me?
All right, Q&A. We've seen a lot of stuff floating around on the internet, and these are going to be stuff that people have been asking. Some hypothetical, some not. So, first question that we've seen is: should a citizen be allowed to build a room in their house that is impenetrable, just complete, no lockpick? It's just impossible. Not even magic can open the door to that room.
Magneto and Loki can't get in, is what you're saying?
Cannot get in. No way in hell. They've likened this to encryption that cannot be broken. So, Wendell, what do you think? Should someone be able to do that?
So, I think that this will surprise you, but we do not believe that a citizen should be able to build a room in their house so secure that nobody can get in. I mean, clearly there's not, there's not a public interest in being able to do that. A person should be able to be secure in their effects and their papers and their information, but clearly, they should not necessarily be able to build a room in their house that's so secure nobody can get in. This is a really pretty good argument. The problem is that when you really think about it, a room in your house has locality. It is located at a specific place. If somebody, you see the Reddit posts where somebody finds, the walk-in safe in the basement in the new house, and it's like, well, we had to get the safe cracker out and like 5 other people, and then we had to get a drill and a blowtorch, and we accidentally burned the house down, but the safe was still there in a cinder block wall, and then we got a sledgehammer, and then we opened it up, and there was nothing in there but some old canned food from before World War II. There's a way in, but you've got to go through a lot of effort to get in there. There's a way in, and you've got to really do some stuff. If you're using like AES 256 encryption, AES 256 encryption implemented the right way, even with quantum computers, you're not going to be able to break that until computers run on something other than energy and take up something other than space. I mean, it's just not, you're not going to be able to do that. If there's a weakness in the algorithm, or there's a weakness in the random number generator, or there's a weakness somewhere in the system, then that may not be true, but perfectly implemented, that is basically an unpickable, uncrackable system. The thing that you've got to keep in mind, though, is that encryption on devices do not have locality. The criminal element can just reach out, it's not even an arm's length, potentially, and touch your secure room. And so now you're not thinking about a secure room in your house, which is probably in a nice neighborhood. Probably, there's not a criminal element constantly in your house. But now imagine that secure room that you need in your house when you're in, like, downtown Detroit, or worse. Then suddenly it's like, maybe I do need an extra 3 or 4 feet of concrete. Maybe I do actually need, extra relockers and extra rebar. So all of the iPhones in the world that are online are all connected to the internet. They don't have the separation of physical space. You don't want it to be really easy for somebody in Virginia to be able to hit a button and be in your phone, because chances are somebody in China will be able to hit a button and be in your phone, and somebody that's working for the GCHQ will be able to hit a button and be in your phone. But not only that, Russian hackers and Chinese hackers and maybe people in North Korea would be able to hit a button and get in your phone. Do you honestly believe that your government would be able to keep secure something like this based on their track record with technology? I mean, let's look at their track record with technology. They got Edward Snowden, say what you want about him. A contractor working in Hawaii was able to walk out with, just crazy levels of intelligence, like SIGINT gamma levels of classified intelligence. And you want them to be able to do this anytime they want, remotely, whenever? That doesn't seem like a good idea.
So, whereas we covered a lot of things that the press has not covered, let's also talk about something else that the press, nor seems like anyone else is really talking about, and that's the constitutional element, the Fifth Amendment and the Second Amendment. How does this tie into that? What do you think?
Justice Scalia just died, and he was sort of famous for saying that the Constitution occasionally does protect criminals just as it protects ordinary citizens. And if this goes through, it is a breathtaking expansion of power. I think that, historically encryption has been classified as munitions. When we're talking about Lotus Notes, in that era, encryption was classified as munitions. Technically, it still is classified as munitions. Intel, an Intel subsidiary, was fined for giving strong encryption to some foreign country that the U.S. doesn't like, which is the first action like that the State Department has taken in forever. and that was in 2014. And so I guess technically encryption is still classified as a type of munitions. But our founding fathers, the fathers of the United States, used very strong encryption that was basically unbreakable in the day, for private communication and private correspondence to ensure that. And so I think it's not too far off the mark to classify encryption as munitions. But I think classifying encryption as munitions also gives you Second Amendment protections. As a citizen, I have the right to arm myself with encryption. And so I'm imagining a scenario where, if I want to have an iPhone, and I want to load AES 256 encryption on my phone, and I do not want to back it up to Apple, is Apple going to be compelled to only write software that would not allow those things to take place? Will I be able to obtain properly implemented AES 256 encryption for my iPhone? It seems like those things would be impossible, and I think that this is very bad. It sets a very bad precedent, because I can't take my privacy into my own hands, because the government doesn't care. They don't secure anything, and corporations don't care because they want to sell my data. So it's my job, it's my responsibility to safeguard my private data, apparently. And now my government wants to take away the tools that I would use to do that, at least potentially. I mean, the constitutional aspect of this is very, very disconcerting. In terms of the Fifth Amendment, we've already had some rulings where, somebody that would give up their password cannot be compelled to, because it may be incriminating. So we have to have other tools for gathering this evidence. That's not to say that this leaves the FBI empty-handed. I think that they're lying through their teeth if they're saying that they're empty-handed. They're absolutely not empty-handed at all. They've got a lot of evidence. It just goes back to good old-fashioned police work.
All right, guys, so that's pretty much it for now. This is going to continue to develop, and that's just the way it's going to work. Just remember, Apple's doing this for marketing purposes. Marketing purposes. The media is praising them or throwing them under the bus, depending on which side of the media we're talking about. But no one's hitting the core issues here of what's happening and why it's happening. That's the why behind things, the reasons behind things are really important. Doing it for marketing purposes. Speaking of that, you guys should grab up our Stop Buying Apple Products shirt. Yeah. There, look at that. Oh my goodness. You know what else? There's all kinds of sexy stuff on this store. Who made this?
I would be down to do a follow-up to this video if you guys have genuinely interesting questions. Post them on our website at techsyndicate.com, and we will do a follow-up video and answer your questions to the best that we can, and try to come up with good questions like, should somebody be able to build a room in their house so strong nobody can get in? It's like, well, the answer to that's probably no. But at the same time, keep in mind that the founding fathers wrote encrypted letters that were basically uncrackable for the day. So, and think about locality, because your phone, I have my phone in my hand, but it's also on the internet, and people in Russia could totally reach out and do bad things to your phone, if they had access. So come up with other good questions, and we'll do our best to address them and say why we think that.
Yeah. All right. Our follow-up video is going to be called Rant 45.
more like Rant 2 hours later. This is a long rant, but it covers a lot of stuff. So if you guys enjoyed it, let us know in the comments again, and we'll see you guys on the website. Thanks to all of our Patreon supporters, tech support members, and people who are grabbing up cool stuff on the store. You guys are keeping us alive, keeping us making videos, and helping us through this rough freaking move. So
yeah, this transition's almost over, and things are just things are going to be more awesome from now on out.
We kind of promise, maybe. All right, we'll see you guys later.
And let's be clear about our anti-Apple bias. Apple, for what it's worth, the Apple operating system is not bad. It's fairly solid. Most of our problem comes from the hardware engineering aspect and some of the nerdier aspects of Apple. And the most succinct way that we can put it for this video, not just limited to this, but this is a big component of it, is I want you to go to apple.com and I want you to configure a 27-inch iMac. And then, the 27-inch iMac is one of the last pieces of Apple hardware that is actually user upgradable. The 27-inch iMac has a door on the back that lets you get at the RAM. For whatever reason, it uses notebook memory, I guess because it's smaller. Configure that iMac on apple.com for 32 gigabytes of RAM. You're going to be paying about $600 for 32 gigabytes of RAM, which on Newegg is nowhere near $600. There's no reason for that premium. That RAM was not designed by Apple. It was not assembled by Apple. It was not anything by Apple anywhere. It's going to be Hynix or Samsung. That is a ripoff. They're not making a profit there. That is robbery. that is why we do not like Apple. Not just that, but that sort of practice.
Yeah, they are a generation or two behind on their hardware. To add to that, we've been to China, we went to a lot of the factories, and listen, I'm going to say right now, I'm probably a hypocrite. Almost everything that we have here has something that is connected to some sort of bad labor practices. However, Apple is in a position where they are the biggest. When we were in China, you guys can just go ahead and take a look at this little essay I wrote here on the Stop Buying Apple Products shirt. But basically, I believe that Apple is in a position where they can use their muscle and all of their vast resources, their money, to try to improve the situations in other countries as far as the labor conditions go. They're in a position they could do that, and they act as if they are wholesome, when in fact they are taking advantage of a large population of people. So.
And it's not just Apple. I mean, it's like when you get to the companies that they're hiring to make these products, it's a cascading effect. Apple could demand that they treat their employees better, but
they're demanding more for less is what the problem is. And that's what we heard when we were there.
Yeah, and we heard that a lot, and a lot of people had a really negative opinion of Apple as a company over there. It was kind of crazy.
That's why we don't like Apple.
The same also kind of runs true for Apple in terms of like their stewardship of open source software. They do use open source software heavily. If it weren't for open source software, they would have never been able to do what they did when they transitioned from OS 9 to OS 10. And I don't believe they are doing nearly as much as they could, as well as they could, with open source in general. I think they owe a lot more to the community than they're giving back. That's just my personal opinion, but, you know,
we could probably make a 30-minute
They owe it to the community.
Yeah, we could probably make a 30-minute video covering all the things that really irk us about Apple, from their closed gardens to the way they treat people, to just their cash hoarding methods, their just everything.